Great. Now, if you need to jump off, and now is a good time to go, but if you can stay with us, that would be fantastic. Yep, thank you very much, Mayan. Excellent. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the spotlight from as many of us as possible so that we can see the rest of our wonderful speakers and panelists who are still with us. And especially I would like to introduce Ewan and Ashtahan to everybody. Ewan, do you want to come off mute and just say hello and who are you? And then we'll do the same with Ashtahan as well.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for having us today. I have a background in earth sciences or remote sensing, and I've recently been working on the Vector project. So I've been having a crash course into the world of social science and mining especially. I've focused a lot on ESG and mining conflicts and also climate mitigation. So yeah, really excited to be here and looking forward to speaking with you all. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ewan. And Ashtahan, how about yourself?
Hi, thank you again so much for having us. It's so exciting for us. I mean, it's for myself. I'm a very beginner to the field. So my background initially is actually in anthropology and international development. And just like you, and I'm also involved in the Vector project. So that was kind of my first exposure to the world of mining. And I'm currently studying social science and sustainability at the University of Bath. So that's kind of how my research is. Well, I'm interested in some of the ethical questions revolving around mining, especially indigenous communities, and sort of just, yeah, these big questions that we all heard and really moving questions. So thank you again for having us. Yeah.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much both for coming and joining us in the panel. So maybe if we start with Ewan. Ewan, did you hear what you were expecting to hear in Bursting the Bubble? Did anything surprise you? What are your thoughts? And then we'll bring in Ashtahan.
Well, I think the thing I'm taking away most from this, a very positive thing actually, is the big promotion of critical thinking. It's very difficult to take a kind of pro-mining or anti-mining stance in the modern world. You know, there's important arguments to both. As everyone has said, we've all got devices that we need to use, and they're an integral part of society. So obviously we do need mining, but clearly there's outcries from indigenous communities and local people, but they aren't being consulted, and they feel their voices aren't being heard in regards to not just changes in land use from mining, but a lot of industries. So, you know, I think it's becoming increasingly hard to stick your head in the sand, for lack of a better phrase. You know, you've got to kind of have an overall view of what's happening with these arguments. You know, you've got to be informed on both sides. So yeah, I think going forward, keep doing what we're doing. It's really, really important to promote that idea of critical thinking. You know, you've got to take it case by case. You've got to understand the context and the history and really, really hear people out, and not just say you've consulted them, but genuinely listen and inform policymakers based on that.
Great. Thank you very much, Ewan. Ashtahan, how about yourself? What do you reckon?
It was really refreshing for me to actually hear this question that even we're questioning how do we feel about mining? Because I think when we ask this, it still stirs up very different emotions from people, because everybody has such different experiences. And at first, when I heard mining, I didn't really think much of it. And then I immediately saw that, okay, there's a very pro-mining and a very anti-mining community, but then there is a middle. And a lot of people say it's impossible to be indifferent to this, but and it was, again, really refreshing to hear from especially experts today that there is indeed a middle, and even personally, how we refer to this, we have to ask these sort of questions. And I saw someone mention in the comments that it's very important that we bring this to government and policy, but also it has to start from us, how we change certain things of our needs and even our consumption habits, or getting used to maybe not buying again, as I think Sophia said, like the newest iPhone or what have you. So these questions are really interesting, and it really got me thinking. But specifically, I mean, my exposure, again, a lot of, especially during my coursework, so I've heard a lot of negative things of how communities are being impacted. So for example, the QMM mine in Madagascar, and their tragic. I mean, they are in a health crisis at the moment because of the mining operations, but also that mine is extracting ilmenite, which is a very essential source, because it's a whitener, I believe. I mean, I'm not a geologist, but I'm sure they could confirm that. I think it's in toothpaste, if it's even in white paint. So basically everything, even in fridges, I think that's how they. So it's so hard to really understand. This is something we need. It's essential, but it has very negative effects on both communities and the environment. So how do we understand we have to make it better, because we can't say completely no to it? But then again, what is that golden middle road? And I think that's where probably technology, as the speaker said, will come in, which is really interesting. It's a very overwhelming for me, because we don't have like an exact answer to this question. Sorry if I'm going on for too long, but it's just, these are some of the things that stirred up in me, is really, I think we're seeing like, okay, there is a possibility, which is very positive. So overall, it's really positive that there's a solution. It's just, okay, how are we going to make that happen? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm loving what you're saying. So I think there's that, what can each of us personally do? And then thinking about, you know, what our skill sets are as well. So what can we bring to the table to help improve everything in the world round about us, and that kind of fire in our bellies, or that get up and go to go do it, rather than just to sit back and expect somebody else to do it. And we heard quite a lot about that on Monday as well, which was exciting. Ewan, coming back to yourself and just reflecting on the full session that we've had this morning, do you have any other comments or highlights that you would like to share with everybody? And then I'm going to go off around the world and just get everybody else's comments on things that they were either pleasantly surprised by, or things that maybe they disagreed with as well. And I'm going to come to Caroline first after Ewan. On you go, Ewan.
Yeah, it's great to see some of the technological advances that people have shared. Minix, especially, you know, with new exploration technologies which are less intrusive in the environment. It really stuck out to me when it was mentioned that, you know, with that was it LIBS? I can't remember what the exact acronym was. You know, the fact that you can have one kind of pilot hole per se, get the chemical composition of the geology around there, and then maybe, you know, decide whether you go ahead with that or not, and not have to make further drill sites. I think that's a great advancement, you know, and it can really reduce the impact we have on the environment, not just at the actual mining stage, but in the early exploration stage as well. You know, we've got to remember there's probably a lot more early exploration stage mining projects out there than ones that fully come to term, because there's plenty of people that are going to be trying but may not get off the ground. So there's probably a much larger impact, at least from the number of mining entities out there that there are from early exploration projects. So I really think it's important to bring down our impact on the environment and people at that stage as well. So yeah, thanks very much for sharing that. It was really, really interesting.
Brill. Thank you very much, Ewan. Caroline, what do you reckon? And then we're going to go to Tasmania and to Owen.
So in terms of the responses to the questions in the bursting the bubble, I found them really quite fascinating. And I mean, there was lots and lots of things I was thinking about, but it was one of the things that that came to mind, and Ewan just touched on it briefly then, was that, you know, the question of, when I say mining, what do you think of? I thought, wow, that's an interesting question, because it is such a small part of the minerals value chain and where we actually get our materials from. And people, I think most of society, and I could be wrong with this, think that you just rip it out the ground, or, you know, you take your ore out the ground, and then next thing you know, it makes your iPhone. You know, there's nothing in between. So there's no thought around, you know, what does the processing mean? What does transport mean? What does, I don't know, how is the material traded, sort of thing, between countries, and how all of that could actually impact on the sustainability of those extractive resources. So that's kind of where my mind was going.
Excellent. And I think this is something we often ask, that what comes to mind when you think about mining, and everybody thinks about a hole in the ground. And they don't.
That scared me that was straight away.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really interesting. It's fascinating, isn't it? Owen, what do you reckon? And then we'll go to Scotland and we'll go to Kate.
Yeah, I found it interesting that people were like the producers are actually getting asked questions about where's your nickel coming from. I thought that's really it is this sort of thing is filtering down through to the producers. I'm not sure if we're going to get to the point where you will actually genuinely have to say, my cobalt came from here, my nickel came from there, lithium came from here, what was produced using this process, that process. Whether consumers even actually end up knowing what that means, or they're just kind of guided by this is seen as better than the other thing. It's hard to get that full understanding, probably as someone who's actually purchasing a product, to know all the steps that went into it. And for us, me as a geologist, understand the mining side of things, but not so much the supply chain side of it. There's so many different things that come together to create that sort of cohesive whole we see as society, or at least sometimes cohesive, that pull everything together. So it's really interesting insights on how things are changing. But we've still got some disconnects at the moment between where the materials are starting off and where they're ending up. So it looks like some of those gaps may be going to change. So it's been positive to see, and some really interesting perspectives.
Great. Thank you very much, Owen. Kate, what do you reckon? Any more monsters under the bed before we go to Dave?
Yeah, I hope that monsters under the bed didn't sound like a sort of patronizing, minimizing thing to say. I kind of wanted to. Owen beat me to the with his point. Really, I was going to say something similar. I was quite taken by, or sort of quite interested in what was said about the need to show responsible resourcing for copper, and about that how copper wires hasn't affected have children mining or impacting landscapes as well. And I thought that was really positive, and I think it really is that circular economy and the responsible resourcing is really a growing thing, and it's very. And I think also from my experience of speaking to community people, I think I was really pleasantly surprised to see that. I think that way of thinking is also spreading to the public generally, to make people maybe confused a bit about what the difference between exploration and mining is, or what it might be like, and whether it is going to be a big hole in the ground. Because I think that AI image was really, but I think it's quite positive to think that people are caring, customers are caring about where their resources are coming from. So yeah, I was quite struck with it.
Brilliant. Thank you
The
very
same
much.
as what Owen said, but he put it more eloquently.
Not at all, not at all. Thank you, Kate. Dave, what do you and your dog reckon? And then we'll go to James.
Where to start? I really loved the panel session at the end. I think that really illustrated the sheer size of the problem the mining industry has communicating what it does to the not just to people, just to the general public. It is a terrible communicator. The mining industry is the worst communicating industry on the planet. I have no doubt. Many of the things that we're talking about as problems, the industry is already onto. So zero entry mining. Most of the big Western companies have no plans to build open cut mines anymore. They're trying to find things which will all be underground and minimal footprint, underground processing and crushing. Just to people, if you put a hedgerow around it, you'd barely know some of these mines existed, the sorts of mines we'll bring in on stream in the future. But having said that, that's not the same everywhere. There's a tripartite really world in mining. There's the Chinese side, the Western side, and now the Saudi side, and they don't all behave the same in wherever they are in the world. One of the things that holds up the Western companies is actually they do try to perform to a standard, and not when they get held to, and that means that they can't operate very successfully in some parts of the world. So it is a hellishly difficult problem to solve, and I think the mining industry might do well to start with education.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. James, what do you reckon? And then we'll go to Kirsty.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. I'm going to make 2 points, but I think two things struck me. These days I'm a geotechnologist. I think I just made that term up about a minute ago. But if we're going to disrupt this industry in the same way that Silicon Valley has disrupted consumer industries in the past with technology. If we're going to disrupt this industry and do what Dave's just talked about, we have to have exactly these conversations. And I suppose, Sarah, this is the first time I've been in a multidisciplinary conversation where we've, you know, I mean, for me to sit in that bursting the bubble panel and hear someone make some of those comments from outside the sector, I'm going, oh crumbs, I've never thought about that. So great, right? So let's do this more, right? Because we need to do this, and that's part of disruption. We need to learn that. The other thing I wanted to say is we touched a bit on agriculture a few times. I have a farming background. I know a few people on the audience have a farming background. We tend to emerge farmers in this world. The agricultural sector has done some reasonably good stuff that we probably could learn from. They do really good stuff around technology, autonomous and precision mining, precision farming, right, which we can take into precision mining. Farm to fork concepts, understanding the tracing and trackability of everything that's produced. But also, I think some of the stuff that happens around the way they work with society around environmental pieces as well, land stewardship, and we talked a bit about resource stewardship as well. So there's similarities there that I think we can learn from.
Yeah, I agree, James, and I know there's been a little bit of chatter going on the side today. We're doing a project at the moment on my parents' farm, which is just along the road from where Kate is at the moment. And so, you know, this land has been in our family for quite a long time. And currently the most financially viable use of the land is to grow barley for the whiskey, because we're in Speyside. So you've got the market right there. And the interesting piece of work we're doing right now is we've engaged with the supply chain in terms of the hauliers and the maltsters and the distillers, because we walked into the distillery and said, hey, we're one of your farmers. We suspect you're having to do things in a bit more of a sustainable fashion, and you're going to be asking us for a whole load of data. So let's talk about it. And it was a brilliant moment, because they just went, where have you come from? And we're now at that point where actually engaging in that dialogue along the value chain is really interesting, because it's about understanding the kind of the power play between the different areas, but also what is a really big risk to one link in that supply chain might be something you can just brush off somewhere else. So actually almost the smoothing out of risk along the supply chain is something that we're so bad at doing, because we're all talking to our customers or our suppliers where we're trying to get the best deal from them. Does that talk to some of what you've just said there?
Yeah, no,
yeah.
That's exactly it.
Awesome. Well, maybe we should do a session next year on farming. Shall we do that? We've got enough farmers who are here already. Fabulous.
It'd be fascinating.
Awesome. Thank you very much, James. Kirsty, let's bring you to the table, and then we'll go to our watermelon farmer and our dairy farmer. We'll bring in Sophia again. On you go, Kirsty.
I think it's really good that you're bringing in different perspectives as well. So it's not just people who know the sector who are talking about it. One point that I thought was pretty good was about the capitalism aspect and the fact that we need to reduce our usage of things. And I think in the circular economy, there's that contradiction as well, because we want to encourage investment in recycling. So you need to have more waste, so you have more to collect. But really, in an ideal world, we should be consuming less. So I think that's an important contradiction to recognize. But ultimately, we don't want the materials to be going to landfill or being considered waste rather than a resource. So it's a contradiction, but we still have to just press ahead either way.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kirsty. And over to our stand-up comedian, Sophia. What do you reckon?
You want a joke? I've got none. No, it's so interesting to hear the feedback as well from the panel, and how I think what Dave was saying about that comms piece feels really huge, because I am starting to learn stuff, but only because I've been with Satala for the last few months. And I think if I hadn't even had that, I wouldn't even have started exploring those ideas and what sort of is happening. And again, like Caroline was saying, I don't think about that process between once the metal's out of the ground and then it gets into my phone, and there's so much there. It is surprising that you had that someone had that trust diagram up the other day and was saying how mining was so low along with like tobacco, but pharmaceuticals was still quite high in terms of like the positive social impact, and that really surprised me. And I think we've we're not telling the story right about what mining can do. But I think there's also something about building trust needs to come from showing some vulnerability and taking account of what went wrong. And I don't know how we have that conversation without just being like self-flagellating and be like, we made all these mistakes, but having that conversation and then saying, this is what we're trying to do to make things better. But yeah, it's lots to think about. I'm still going to be mulling over for the next few days, I'm sure, or weeks.
Well, it's just as well, because everybody, we're only halfway through the conference. Way! We've got another 4 sessions that of course start this afternoon. But before we go there, I'm just going to go to Matt and to Aileen and to Ludovine just to get their thoughts on this as well, because of course they've sat through all of the other talks that we've had. Matt, do you want to go first? And then we'll go to Aileen.
Yeah, thanks all for the speakers. It's been, as usual, great. Kate, I like the monster. You're going to get this a lot, the Monster Med, not just because my kids are really into Monsters Inc. at the moment, so that's really good. But also it kind of led into a question that I personally struggled as an exploration geologist, is when I went to spoke to someone, a community, I'd say, can I come and explore on your land? And they go, oh, well, no, is there going to be a mine? And I go, well, no, actually, I'm just an exploration geologist. My company's just looking for it. Maybe if it's a mine, it's not really my problem. Or again, I've always struggled with that. How do I knock on someone's door and ask, can I dig a hole in your garden? I don't think I personally still have a good question for that, answer for that.
And because you don't know, do you? Nobody knows. There will be a mine, because if that's why you're exploring, to see if there's anything that's worth.
Yeah, but even that concept in itself is really hard to communicate.
The chances are low as well. It's really hard to, and as soon as you, difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure you wanted to respond to the original. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And then going on to like more of the tech stuff, the thing that always amazes me is there's so much great work being done, you know, in technology and geology and research. The thing that makes me sad is that often it's just not connected up, and often it probably leads into what Dave was saying, is that maybe some of these innovations and stuff are in a system that needs to fundamentally change. I think Elon Musk has a point where he says there's no need to optimize something that shouldn't exist. So maybe some of the practice and stuff that we've been doing need to really fundamentally completely change. And hopefully at the end of this conference, I'm going to give a talk that will try and kind of share some of my thoughts on that kind of stuff. And then into the work that Sophia and maybe Kirsty were talking about, more of those bigger, I don't want to talk about politics, but that capitalism, socialist, you know, that kind of how can governments play a role in all this kind of stuff. And I think the elephant in the room that I put in the chat is that this transition to net zero, moving away to more electric vehicles, having more of this stuff, it actually incentivizes a lot of these tech and other kind of companies. So maybe instead of us saying, oh, we all need to consume more by replacing our car with an electric car, maybe we need to reduce the amount of cars, find alternatives, and then what we can't replace, we then replace. So again, this is this kind of like, it's in the interest of the mining companies to us go down this energy transition route. Maybe we kind of rethink a lot of that kind of stuff. So yeah, lots of very thought-provoking stuff, and looking forward more to come. Hopefully my brain doesn't explode like yours, Sophia.
Thanks, Matt. Aileen, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Ludovine.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of really interesting ideas brought forward, and I think especially from today and linking in with the person in the panel, but also what Caroline was saying, it's like this kind of, there's like multi-step processes and everything, and often like you only work in one very small element of that, and I think there's a really big lack of understanding of the whole process, from the exploration to the processing to the using in materials. But I think the public expect us to know, so that when we're the person knocking on the door and they're like, what's this going to be, and then we don't have the answers to that, I think it creates the distrust and people kind of get on edge about it. And I know in my own experience, the way I've often gone about it and trying to adjust, it's like, oh, this is what we need for our electric vehicles and stuff, but the environmental damage is much more important than that. And I think it links with what Gersha yesterday was talking about in terms of if we try to tell people what to think, they're not going to react well. That doesn't actually work. So I think we kind of need to reevaluate the way we kind of engage with communities. But I also think this links to a bigger concept of what is responsible sourcing. It's we talk a lot about it, but what does that actually mean? Because everyone's going to have a different understanding of it, and it will mean one very different thing to one country than it will to another. So I think we need to also have that conversation to try and unravel it a bit and get a bit of a better understanding, so that we know what we mean when we say that, and when people ask us what we mean, we understand it. So yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Aileen. And Ludovine, final thoughts.
I'm going to go on a slight tangent, but a lot of what we discussed this morning, whether it's mining is a great big hole or we need great big innovation, there's always this view that mining is big because on an individual level, we sit and look at some of these assets and it's huge, but and I'm sorry for the capitalist talk, but it is leading to revolution, just bear with me. Mining is actually a really small industry. What I mean is, like, financially, we are worth nothing as an industry. So I just checked the stats, but this morning, the top 222 mining companies in the world are valued at 1.75 trillion. Just to give you an idea, Microsoft is 2.9 and Apple is 2.6. So together, these two companies, as valuable as they are worth 3 times a good proxy for the mining sector. So 2 things come to mind. Yeah, we need to consume less. I would say we need to think about what our money is worth more and how we use that financial capacity that we're creating towards, you know, the innovation that we need to enable the rest to exist. And I'm not limiting this to mining. I mean, the World Economic Forum has made an agenda point of linking mining and farming, because actually with soon to be 10 billion people on the planet, you won't be able to farm without mining, because we simply, like, you know, have to rework the actual ground, the earth. And I'm being careful because it's full of geos, but like we need to rethink how we farm. So what I would say is that we need to push past the slogans on how we use our money. And one tiny example of that is the EU came out with a CRM Act. Whether it's a good or a bad act, we can debate endlessly. But one of the key commitments from the EU Commission was to get a real rapid process on including mining and all mineral operations under the EU taxonomy, which is basically a sticker that says, this is an environmentally useful or friendly activity. Where 1 year later, progress on that is exactly nowhere. Because a lot of groups, including from within the EU executive, are saying, no, we can never categorize mining as environmentally useful or friendly. Well, then, I'm sorry, but without the money, none of this innovation actually can, you know, deploy. And we're going in the same circle of this conversation. So I realize that's a very unromantic way to bring this conversation around, but I do think we need to connect the dots to that too.
Great. Thank you very much, Ludovine. Always finds a way to get the Critical Raw Materials Act for Europe into the conversation, don't we? It might be close to your heart. Awesome. So with that, everyone, we've heard, again, a huge range of different fantastic ideas, examples of where great stuff is being done, but also voiced through a multitude of different perspectives, which is great. As we know, there is, of course, always that saying, which is, 1 rock, 2 geologists, 3 answers. I think if we then extrapolate that out into the complexity, etc., of the sector as a whole, it becomes much more interesting, perhaps, than even that answer. Good news is we have another session starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon, UK time, with a fantastic lineup. Please go to the website, check out who is going to be speaking with us this afternoon, and come and engage in the conversation, because this is just as much about everything that is going on in the chat and the background conversations as what you see here on the screen in front of you. So with that, another final round of applause for our wonderful speakers that we've had in this session. Absolutely glorious. Thank you very much to all of you. We'll let the Australians go to bed. We'll let the Canadians go and have some coffee who have been dialed in this morning. And for those of you who are in a more normal time zone. We will see you later on today. Thank you very much, everyone. See you later.